Welcome back to another episode of Over the Glass. I am your host, Jay.
I am Nessa. Today we are joined by Andrew Willis. Andrew, would you like to introduce yourself? How you
Yeah,
identify, how you got into hockey?
um, my name's Andrew. I am pronouns are he, him. Um, been a hockey fan forever, it feels like. Diehard Canucks fan. Right now, I'm the local beat reporter for the Jacksonville Icemen of the ECHL, so I cover the Icemen for Inside the Rink. Um, and yeah, I kind of just stumbled into hockey when I was like 8 or 9 years old. Um, my cousin wasn't a big sports guy, but he played video games all the time. And somebody had given him like NHL. I think it was like NHL '04 or something on the N64, NHL '01, whatever those earlier games were. And I kind of just picked up the game through video games, but ended up falling in love with the sport entirely. So I didn't know too much about hockey. I'm from Florida. I didn't know too much about Canada either. So I chose the Canucks because I thought the orca and the colors were cool. But I don't believe in bandwagon jumping, so I've been in it for the long haul.
It's funny you bring up video games because I remember I was playing, I think it was the Super NES version of the NHL. I'm originally from New York, and so this was around the time when I made my first trip back. My cousins there, for some reason, they were given the NHL game on Nintendo, and so I would play with my cousins, but we didn't really play the game. We just had our players skating around the ice trying to like beat up people or like hit them or anything. I don't think you could actually do it in the game, but I just thought it would be like, who cares about this game? Let's just like crash into people.
I'm pretty sure it was NHL Hits like '01, like the classic like OG
Something
NHL
like
Hits that my
that.
dad gave me. Yeah, and I discovered you could turn off like all the penalties and like turn the checking mechanisms up. And so at one point in time, I just told my dad, I was like, "Come in here and watch me like play this hockey game." And he's like, "All you're doing is leveling people." I was like, "Yeah, but I'm scoring. I'm like I'm winning." But I would just lay these guys out all over the ice.
Yeah, I have no idea. My memory is just he was playing this game and I was like, what if we just don't play the game? What if we just run into people? And he's like, that sounds cool. Let's do that. So,
My fondness of the hip check came from NHL Hits and no penalties. Turning the options off.
tell us a little bit more about your love for the Canucks because you said you're originally from Florida. So, were you in an area where you would have potentially stumbled onto being a Bolts fan or being a Panthers fan?
Yeah, probably so. And to be honest, I mean, I was like, my first introduction to the country of Canada was like a book report I decided to do when I was 7. And so from there was like a slippery slope. I was like, okay, they got all kinds of cool stuff. Hockey, they have ice. We don't have that in Florida. Uh, um, but once I finally like discovered the game, by learning from the mechanics and the rules, like for me, a lot of life is like I can have the what, but I need to know the why behind it, especially in sports. So learning the mechanics of like the flow of the game and how plays could be ran really came from playing on the Nintendo 64. And at the time, the team that just happened to be the one that I was best playing with was the Canucks, and I originally chose them because it was the West Coast Express era back in the day, so they had the gradient jerseys that were like the maroon into the navy, and everybody, you could ask Canucks fans everywhere, and they're like, "That's the most awful jersey." But to me, that is like the holy grail. I have a gradient Todd Bertuzzi in my closet. It's amazing. It sits right next to the reverse retro Elias Pettersson one that they brought back with the gradient. Um, so I didn't really know anything about the sport. It was just like the colors and the team was good on the game. And so after I had kind of gotten used to, a feel of the sport of hockey through the game, I was like, well, this team is, I've won a Stanley Cup with this team already, like even if it hasn't really happened. So I was like, all right, my family is a big sports family, big football, like diehard football family. Um, and even in bad seasons, it was a cardinal sin to bandwagon jump in my family. So once I chose the Canucks, I was like, for better or for worse, we're in it for the long haul. So, and
So
it's
far, it's
been
been for worse.
a lot, yeah. it's been a little bit of a struggle, just a little bit. But crying myself to sleep is a very very normal thing during hockey season for me. I'm more shocked when they don't break my heart, which is always a pleasant surprise.
What are your feelings towards the Bruins? Because one of my memories of the Canucks is when you guys made it to the Cup, and I think you guys lost. Not to bring back horrible memories, but
Trigger,
you,
PTSD.
triggering.
he's bracing for impact. Wasn't it Game 7 that the Canucks lost at home? And I just remember the classic image of somebody in downtown, like things are like burning behind, and they're just like screaming.
Yeah, yeah, it's so funny because I recently I always joke I don't mess with like New England sports teams. Like I just don't, especially after 2011. That to me is like people are like, oh yeah, the Bruins won the cup in 2011. I'm like 2011 didn't happen. That's a fake year. That's fake news. It's not real. That was a fever dream. Everybody in the NHL just like thought up 2011. Um, I it's triggering. My thoughts of the Bruins are I wrote a story on a New England sports team and I called it my disaster piece because it went completely sideways and I was like, okay, I think I'm afforded one disaster piece a year, but when I looked on at first I thought the team was in Maine, so I was like, Maine's not Massachusetts, and then somebody me, in the process of researching this article, found out that Worcester is in Massachusetts. And so when the article went sideways, I was like, that's why I don't mess with New England sports teams. Ever since 2011, things just haven't been the same. It's just bad juju.
I kind of wanted to ask you your thoughts on, the Canucks just named Quinn Hughes as captain, and I kind of just wanted to know what you thought about that.
To be honest, I think it's one of the funniest things in the world because I kind of joked last year. I was like, well, what if Quinn wears the C? And my friend was like, that would be wild. Can you imagine? And so the fact that it's been manifested, that Quinn is the captain, is pretty. I think it's funny, but he's a I mean, he's a great player, highly skilled. His hockey IQ is amazing. And personally, like one of the things I thought was interesting whose the captaincy talk started, it almost seemed like he really did kind of, you hear it all the time, but turn the page. Where I think even as somebody just watching the game, you could see him being, stepping up into that leadership role a little bit more, being a little bit more vocal, directing traffic on the ice. There were a couple times where he was caught on the hot mic, like really like barking out orders, and I was like, "Yo, look at Quinn! Like he's really growing into it." So I think it's great. I think for a highly skilled young player like Quinn to be the next leader, um, I think after the last few seasons, I think this is a really welcome like change of pace for the organization. So I'm excited, and I think I think he's gonna step up into the role and grow into it. I think even more so than we all may expect at the time.
Yeah, we were joking around about it on our little Discord group because he's so memeable, and people
Yes,
we literally use his reactions as memes. It's
one of
just
my
a
quotes, one of the tweets that I had, that's a Quinn Hughes quote. And I had it pinned to my profile for the longest time because I like highly related to it. But he was like saying like I'm just one of these guys that doesn't really know what's going on, and I'm like me. Yeah, highly relatable there, Quinn.
The Canucks recently had something with the local fire department, and I don't follow the Canucks that closely, but given all of the retweets with memes and just like photos that I've seen of him, I was like, wow, he's smiling and he's having a good time. Like maybe his destiny was actually to be part of like to be a firefighter because
It
he
was
just looks thrilled to be there.
He really does, and they did like that, like the clip where he's sitting down in the fire department. And he was talking about how his grandpa still tells him like it's not too late to take the fire test. So seeing him in like all of the turnout gear and stuff, I'm like, man, if this all goes south for Quinn, he's already got a home at the fire department. He's already one of those guys. He looked like he fit in perfectly fine, especially once he put on the
Right.
Kelowna Fire Department like T-shirt and backwards hat and everything. I was like, he is basically one of them now. He is Captain Firefighter Quinn.
his new nickname.
Putting fires out on and off the ice. What a guy.
Great. What a guy.
What a dude.
I just wanted to point out that I like your flag. I have one, but San Jose. And
Yeah.
quick story time. So my girlfriend and I decided to go to playoffs, game 7, round 1, 2019, Sharks against Vegas. We're standing by the glass for warm-ups. We hold up the flag and the equipment manager's like, likes that flag, and he hands
Yeah.
us a warm-up puck. So we have a memorabilia from that game. So good.
Dude, that's awesome. I wanted one of these for so long, and then like bring hockey back, like had them discontinued for a little bit. And during the
Mhm.
middle of the pandemic, I reprinted them. So I was one of those times where I was like, okay, if I'm gonna blow $20, it's gonna be on one of those flags I've been wanting for like 4 seasons now. So
Yeah.
it's the first thing. Anytime I move, it's the first thing that goes on the wall. Yeah, I like it.
Nice.
Like everywhere the lights
Nothing
up.
else is set up, just the flag. You're like, we're home.
I'm like, oh, it's like Dr. Pepper goes in the fridge and the Canucks flag goes on the wall, and that's how it's working. I'm a simple guy.
When
Simple.
I first moved into my apartment, I thought, oh, I need to get a doormat because just one of those things that you apparently do when you're an adult. You start thinking about those types of things, and I really thought hard about getting a hockey related one. I just could not find one that I wanted, but I met it halfway, and I got a. It's not a shark; it's a whale, and I forgot what it says, but it's some kind of pun related to using whale in the sentence, and I was like, good enough. It's hockey ish, it's cute. We'll go with
Right.
that.
It's like if you're aware, you get the relation.
Mhm.
Yeah, I
Mhm.
have. As a matter of fact, okay, so show and tell, I suppose. I have this like stuffed shark here,
Nice.
and I
Yes.
got it. It's just a random stuffed shark I own, but I got it from the aquarium when I was at the Mall of America in Minnesota. Um, and I named it Jose, and nobody can understand why I named the shark Jose. And I'm like, because hockey. That's why he's not a San Jose Shark, but he's Jose the Shark. Like, come on, guys. So that's my show and
I
tell.
love that.
Nobody
Thank
gets
you.
three
That was
people.
good.
Yeah, thank you. It's like you guys will get
If
it.
I could turn my camera, my whole sofa over there is just all sharks.
It's like
Yeah,
all
There's
your
a whole
shark
bunch
plushies.
of shark plushies on the sofa. that's
I,
their sofa. No one else actually sits there.
I went to the Mall of America. I went for a 21 Pilots concert a few years back, and so I
Ooh,
went to the Mall of
nice.
America that day. And it's like I wanted to see the aquarium, but I didn't want to get it. I couldn't find a T-shirt I like, so I was like, I'll just get this stuffed shark. And my cousin was with me, and she's like, "Were you gonna name it?" And I was like, "Yeah, he's Jose." And nobody understood. I was like, "It's brilliant. It's like a stroke of genius. Nobody appreciates."
It's okay. We appreciate it lots.
Thank you, thank you. I do what I can. I have a ton of actually a couple years back for my birthday, my mom got me like a custom build a bear, but it's got like green and blue like diamonds and stuff on it, and she's got it decked out in Canuck stuff. So I've got it like in a display case, like
Nice.
Quinn Hughes rookie cards over there. It's a really cool centerpiece for my hockey collection. His name is Brock Beresford.
Nice.
Yeah,
Maybe you'll have
I
to do a little show and tell after our recording. I want to see all this stuff.
for sure. I have
yeah.
some good stuff. I came across like a Pavel Bure action figure like from 1994, the original, still in the like package. Nobody in Jacksonville, Florida, knows what a 1994 Vancouver Canuck is. So I got an $8 action figure. And for me, it's like the lottery. But
Nice.
for everybody down here, they're just like, cool. Yeah, that's hockey.
Yeah. If you go to Vancouver and try to resell it.
Oh, yeah, I posted on Twitter and I had so many like congratulations, and I was like, thank you, kind strangers 3,000 miles away that get it. So down here, I'm alone.
I have a whole shelf up here with a bunch of sharks baubles I can show you after too.
Oh, nice. I got for like my birthday, like during the middle of the pandemic, one of my friends had actually scored one of the Elias Pettersson pops from Rogers Arena. So that one actually might be like. Besides, I have a gritty pop too, which In my office at
Must
work for
have.
the longest time, it was the one Funko Pop I just kept on my desk. It was Gritty. But those
It
are
just
like
puts
my
a
two
smile on your
top.
face.
Who doesn't love Gritty? Like,
I mean, Gritty's the queer icon we deserve.
he is a modern day. He is the mascot Madonna. Dare I say?
I kind of love that.
He's a trailblazer unto his own. You know, he's like if somebody, uh, I don't know, let a gremlin drink too much Kool Aid at once.
Like I follow nothing related to the Flyers except I love Gritty.
Except Gritty, yeah. Or occasionally I'll check in and see what Torts is up to, like Torts' shenanigans in Philly. What's he got going on?
Grady's so cool. He had a cameo in. Have you watched Abbott Elementary, the
No,
show?
I need to
Oh,
though.
such a
Everybody
good
said it's
show.
great.
It's so good. But they all they all got excited. They're like, Grady's coming, and they make such a big deal. He's great.
That was the great thing about like my Funko Pop on my desk. Like nobody, I was the biggest hockey fan, like out of like my management team and my staff, and so people would come in. They didn't know anything about hockey, but they knew Gritty, and they'd be like, "I love that thing." I'm like, "Yeah, he's fantastic. How do you not?"
That thing.
The thing.
Okay, so we wanted to ask you about your experience. You write for Hockey of Tomorrow. If you could kind of just talk to us about your experience as a trans writer.
Yeah. So it's you know, I don't really even know how to lead into this properly because it's such a weighted thing. It's a and to be honest, I guess I haven't really considered. I haven't so much as thought about being a guy as I have in the last 6 7 months now. Before I started writing with Hockey of Tomorrow in July, I started writing with Inside the Rink late February, early March, and I've always lived life as I love sports. I play soccer. I skateboard. I'm into a little bit of everything. I always have been, and I've always been a dude that likes sports. So when I started writing for Inside the Rink, that's just the frame of mind I've always been in. But with the recent legislature, challenges and bans and laws and rhetoric, it's made me hyper aware of being trans in athletic spaces and sports spaces, um, especially in the last couple months, as things get injuncted and restrained in the courts or battled. Or recently, the Alabama Court of Appeals, said that like trans people that make up like the fabric of the constitutional fabric of the history or some load of whatever. Um, it personally on a personal space, I'll say that um, I haven't in as much experience so much hate directly at me, which is nice because to be honest, it's one of those things I fear every day. Is I'm going to write an article and somebody's going to disagree with it, and it's going to be loaded with like slurs and low blows, you know? Because as far as I'm concerned, like, yeah, I might be a trans guy, but at the end of the day, like, I'm just a dude that likes sports, right? And one of the things that I was really conflicted with in March, um, when all of the bills, especially the stuff here in Florida, started passing, was it's probably safer for me to not be trans, especially as a public figure, and being so. I just started medically transitioning. I'm 30. I just started medically transitioning in November of last year. Like, I still went through, because the pandemic happened, I still went through 4 years of like social transition before ever getting on my, starting medically. So, a lot of the arguments I hear anyway being directed at, especially like trans care for youth, um, is just wild to me because I think if I would have had those things available to me at 17 when I first came out, the last 12 years of that in between space would have been dramatically different in my personal growth and my personal development. I think it would be like I would be fighting, I think, this battle that's currently happening maybe from a healthier perspective because I wouldn't necessarily be transitioning the bulk of transitioning in the middle of where they're making it almost impossible for us to do it. You know, um, so when all of the stuff in Florida started happening, I was like, maybe it's safer for me to not be so visibly trans. But all of the debates and everything started around keeping trans kids out of sports. And so I felt I really reflected on it because, to be quite honest, I'm still terrified. I work, I cover the Iceman. I'm there every home game. But in the event that, say, my hockey nachos go south and my gut doesn't agree, using the bathroom can land me in jail if I use the bathroom in that arena. So there is this, like, I had to sit down and really be introspective and meditate and be reflective upon it because it was like, do I hide this one aspect, which I feel like is to me, it's a very mundane aspect. Like, when somebody else shows up, do you make their gender the entire topic of, like, their identity and who they are? Okay, I'm trans. So what? Like, I can write and I can skateboard and I can embarrass myself very, very proficiently. There's much more interesting things about me than being trans. Um, but I had to make that decision. Like, did I want to hide that one, what to me feels very minute part of my personality, or did I want to lean into that and say, hey, like, I'm not, I'm not backing down from the fight. Like, I understand that this is going to be a battle, and there are kids that aren't able to transition for whatever reason, family. There's adults that are in that same sort of position too, whether it's, they can't afford it or they're not there yet, they don't have the resources. Um, and there's kids and there's adult trans people out there that love sports and think that they should be in sports spaces. And I agree. That was the thing behind my Hockey is for Everyone article I recently wrote was, you know, hockey is for everyone. At the end of the day, it's a sport. Everybody's competitive. Everybody's got a competitive bone in their body. Even if they tell you otherwise, there's always that little bit of compete there. Sports are human, and trans people are human, and um, yeah, a little bit of, like, a defiant sort of decision to, like, to be honest, maybe throw both middle fingers up at my governor and be like, I'm not going anywhere. I'm occupying the spaces I believe I should occupy, and sports has always been one of them. It's never going to not be one of them. I love sport. I've loved them since I was a child. Hasn't changed. Been heartbroken a few times. Been real upset a few times, but it's never driven me away from competition in sports. And so, um, yeah, I've been fortunate enough not to experience any personal blowback as being a trans writer, as far as my identity goes. To say I don't experience what feels like a little bit of preference to be maybe tucked away is another thing. Um, but I feel like I have adequate support, at least on a professional basis, and the team, the Icemen, do a great job with being very diverse as far as, being out with the community and welcoming different groups and different people. Because Jacksonville is a very diverse city, and we have a very eclectic melting pot mix of cultures here in the city. So the Icemen do a great job of trying to keep hockey accessible to everybody here as well, which is nice to sort of have that personal uh, mindset be in line with, like, the team too, which is a lot of the reason why I like the Canucks. Uh, it is what it is. I guess is kind of my mindset around it. Like, I can't stop being trans, and I'm not going to stop loving sports and being in sports areas. So, um, yeah, I have a sticky note that stays on my desk, and in all caps underline it says existence is resistance, and that's just kind of my mindset right now. And um, we can't let the bad guys win, and we don't deserve to be bullied out of spaces where we belong. So uh, it could be ultimately something that may hinder professional progress because of people's own, biases and objectives or opinions or whatever. But uh, I'm also a firm believer that, like, the right people will find you, and that you will find the right people. So um, it is what it is. I'm not gonna stop trans. I'm not gonna stop loving sports. So I'm here, not going to work.
I guess I want to start out by saying thank you for sharing your story, and I also admire your perseverance and your strength. Being out in Florida as all this stuff is happening, um, as somebody who can kind of relate to a lot of what you said, especially with right now with like trans youth and how they're being targeted. I mean, the whole trans community in general is being targeted, but like specifically, they're using trans youth as a way to kind of like push this narrative forward because they're like, oh, we need to protect the children and blah 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 and all this stuff like that. Like, had I had resources, even just the social acceptance of it when I was growing up and going through, my journey as an adolescent, like that would have probably lessened the amount of years that I had to unlearn what I was being taught to like really find myself later in life and just to see like the young generation these days, they're learning about I feel like they're learning about themselves sooner,
Yeah,
and the fact that they are aware of this and this stuff is actively happening, like it frustrates me even more that they have to endure this. But I have to be hopeful that maybe in some way it's a good thing that this is being talked about. um I will also say that like everything that's happening out in Florida is like one of the main reasons why I still have not gone out there to hang out with some of my friends that live out there and I haven't seen them in a long time. Like I've had a conversation with them where I'm just like I am legit concerned for my safety to go and even just spend a weekend with you guys. Like because like you said, like you can't stop being who you are, and I've spent majority of my time living in very progressive parts of this country, and it wasn't until I started living in other areas where I started realizing like, oh, like I used to think, oh well, I don't really talk about how I'm queer, how it's not something like that's very personal for me to share with somebody once I get to know them more. So I felt like by not being so quote unquote out and proud, like I should be fine. But the problem is you start realizing that there are things that you can't really control. Like just walking down the street, the fact that I have short hair already makes people question, is that person queer?
yeah,
And what am I going to do? Go on and put a wig on, start wearing a dress when I leave this area? Like, no, that's not who I am. And those are things that I started realizing that, like, people started staring at me more and I started noticing it more versus if I walk down the street here, like, no one gives two shits most of the time. But it's things like that where that started causing me a lot of anxiety that I'm like, no matter how much I try to just blend in and just be myself and not bother anybody, like there's even instances even in the Bay Area where I have been confronted in the bathroom, and thankfully it hasn't led to anything like as we've seen like in the media where someone gets dragged out by the police or something like that. But it's still it angers me, and it just amplifies all this other stuff that's happening in like I'm just going to focus on like our country alone with what's going on right now. um but I do love hearing that the team, the Jacksonville Icemen that you cover, that they are offering as much of a safe space as they can amidst all the stuff that's going on right now. And I mean, we're here and rooting for you to obviously we all want a space in the sport because we do belong in this sport, and I just hope things kind of like get better, and I want to hope that they're not as bad as we've been seeing in the news, but
It's scary. It's scary here.
yeah.
And I apologize if I'm all over the place in my response. I because it's so there's so many emotions. There's so much um, anger. And anger is really prevalent, like you were saying, because like I moved back home after living in the Midwest for 5 years. At the beginning, I moved back home and the pandemic happened, which was like, hey, welcome back to Florida. But then seeing progressively in the time that I've been here, just how I don't want to say much of a flip flop. I feel like at some point you can't be too naive and to think that maybe the hate that's festering to the top wasn't lingering somewhere within the local population, the local community. Um, but the way that it's been endorsed, right? Like even from the governor's office, this hate is being endorsed, and it's being done so through, laws and bills, and it's ridiculous. Like I use that the bad hockey game nachos example, but like that's the real reality is like I can be doing my job as a reporter and have to use the bathroom and somebody take exception to that, and all of a sudden um, I'm being prosecuted for simply having to do like the most basic human function of all, right, which is go to the restroom. So it's just really crazy. Like there's a lot of anger, there's a lot of hurt. It's hard not to take it. Obviously, it's hard not to take it personally when it impacts you so personally. Um, but to see it in Florida, especially because I mean, like Orlando is one of the drag. I mean, for the while, it's like the drag capital. Like everything happened. It was like some of the biggest like drag tournaments or shows or whatever went on down there. And then like the Pulse shooting, and the way that people forget, and that's what I try to highlight on with like, especially in the state of Florida, is that when the Pulse shooting happened, there were lines of people showing up to blood banks to donate blood. There were people there was a lot of people in the community, a lot more people in the community that want to make a positive difference after that than there are guys that agree with, like, just recently in Jacksonville, we had the Dollar General shooting. And there's a lot more people in Florida that are more reflective, I think, of the events after Pulse and even the events after the Dollar General shooting that is more representative of the general attitude here. But the problem is that the minority is so hateful and so angry about the wrong things and so caught up in using their megaphones. I always say they're the idiots with the loudest megaphones in the smallest echo chamber because they're the ones shouting the most and they're making the most noise. And so that does get a lot of attention. And it's been scary to see sort of that people almost afraid to show up in the right ways, like what happened at the Pulse shooting, and people feeling more emboldened to carry out acts like what happened at Dollar General here in Jacksonville a couple weeks ago. And because it comes from the top, when leadership and when you have representatives in the state legislature calling trans people mutants. Yeah, that came from a state representative here in Florida. When that kind of stuff comes out, you start categorically, to otherizing people and putting them in these boxes and reducing us down to incentive clickbait, headlines that outrage people. Um, the people that have maybe co-opted that mindset or that hate in private feel very, 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 very audacious about doing it publicly too. And that's what makes it scary. I mean, it is very scary here because as much as the you have great support in the community and the community continues to move forward in ways that show that's reflective of that we're going to fight back, we're going to stand our ground and stand up for one another. Uh, there's a lot of hate that gets endorsed and a lot of a lot of guns in the state of Florida, which is it's a little bit terrifying. You know, you have to it to say that I don't show up to the arena and wonder if I'm going to be a victim of some deranged vigilante justice every time I'm there to do my job. That would be a lie. You know, I'm very aware of being very trans in very public spaces, especially in spaces where the legislature has already tried to legislate me out of them. You know, even if it's just by using the bathroom. So, that's why I think it's important for to be seen, you know, and to say like there's still people here. I'm trying to move. I'm actively getting a game plan ready so that I can move out of the state because of the recent they appealed the injunction against State Bill 254, which impacts our healthcare here as trans adults. So I have enough to, if I need to, I have things arranged, but I don't know what's going to happen to my transition after January. So I'm really trying to, as much as I love the state and I love my city, I think Jacksonville is one of the most diverse places in the country. We have one of the best food scenes on the planet. I mean, everybody eats here, everybody cooks here. It's great. Um, but I'm having to definitely put the plan in action to get gone. You know, for as much as I love my city, personal safety prevails.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
that's a lot.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
commend you. I actually visited Florida back in April, I want to say. For my girlfriend had friends that were getting married out in Clearwater, and we took a road trip because I have an irrational fear of flying, so we decided to drive to Florida. Um, and first of all, driving through the South is always an experience because I feel like even as a cis person, I have to mentally prepare for anything that could happen. Traveling with my girlfriend, I mean, like we're not the girliest girls you'll see, right? Like I still dress very plain. Like I wear soccer pants and like a hoodie, right?
Right.
And like I still get stares sometimes. No, I'm comfy. Like so going to Florida, and we were really lucky that nothing happened, right? But it's probably because we're cis and we could be like straight passing to anyone who doesn't know any better. But it was such a like mental preparation for me, like be aware of your surroundings at all times, make sure that you know like we need to have a plan just in case anything happens. Like it was it's scary to think about because you don't hear about the community still being there and like fighting for things as much as you hear about the hate coming out of that state, at least on this side of the country. So it's visiting a state where all you hear about is so much negativity, so much hate, there's so much anger towards our community. It's scary to visit, and like I didn't want to go, but I was like, well, I have to support, it's a
Yeah,
wedding. And so we did it. But coming out of it, I was like, I couldn't wait to get out of that state.
yeah.
It was so much anxiety the whole time. It's so much stress, and I can't imagine what it's like living there. So kudos to
It
you.
it
Kudos
is.
to anyone who's stuck there.
And that's the thing. That's the thing is like why I felt like it was really important for me to say like, hey, I'm a trans guy, whatever. It's a like to me, it's no big deal. And to be honest, I maybe it's just pretty naive black and white thinking, but it shouldn't matter. You know, like I was saying earlier, when you show up to some places, like the first thing that we all highlight is your gender. Like, do you introduce yourself to somebody, and you're like, hi, I'm so and so, and I'm only a girl on Wednesdays. Like that's not like what I'm saying. Like that's not what happens in the real world. That's not. We don't make that a thing. It's not. People don't sit down and discuss gender like that. So, like feeling like my whole identity is just boiled down to that one label is like wild to me. It's because like we're gonna hyperfixate on you hating me because you didn't like what I did for myself. But okay, that's cool. But like, I mean, at best, you could. I don't know if we're gonna hate. I just feel like if we're gonna really like hate on something, it should be like you were really like kind of an asshole to the waiter at the restaurant, and I didn't like that. Like I feel like we should probably gauge people, if we're going to talk about like, and I hate is a strong word. I don't like the word hate, but if we're really going to judge somebody, it should be, I feel like, off of their like characters and morals rather than things they really can't control. So if being visible was important to me in that way because, um, we're all being boiled down to that one label, and the truth is there's trans people are and part of every fabric of this society. Like, uh, I there's a lady at a local Dunkin' Donuts that's a trans woman, and I love that. I love that little like knowing of like solidarity look that we give each other as she passes me my coffee through the drive-through window. Like, I got you, and I got this caramel macchiato, and life is good. But and that's what we need. Like, that's, we need people, we need that solidarity because not everybody can leave, right? Not everybody has the resources to flee. Not everybody even has the welcoming community within their own personal like makeup. And so I think that the more of us that can be like, hey, there's some of us that are here and we're in the same boat as you, and we're being, at least in my view, we're being brave enough to say like, we got you, boo. Don't worry about it. We're gonna fight because we understand that not everybody can leave. And
Your
even
cat is also supportive back there.
oh, yeah, that's Blaze. That's my oldest. He's very vocal. He gets upset when I won't just sit down on the recliner with him and chill. So he's like, "Where are you at, Dad?" But yeah, and he's a great actor as well.
I wanted to piggyback off of what you were talking about, because I was watching this video recently, where it was kind of like debating between like liberal gays and like conservative gays, specifically people who identify as male, and there were a lot of good points, and then other ones where it was just like, oh my god, I can't believe you think that way and you're actively voting that way. But it really just reiterates the frustration for me when there's like a divide within the queer community. And I love what you're talking about, where there's this understanding that you're like, I'm living my best life, I see you living your best life, and I want that for you, and I'm going to fight um, that fight for you as well. um, like I've talked a number of times on this podcast where like I understand my privilege in terms of my queerness and where I live in this country. Like there's other parts of me where I don't feel so privileged, but like that part of it, I'm privileged enough to that it's a very expensive state. But I almost feel like I pay this premium for my safety because I've lived in other parts of this country where I'm just like, it's exhausting, and I commend people who stick around, whether it's because that's your home or whatever the case may be, because it is exhausting to walk outside your door and have to go through that day in day out. Like I lived a certain amount of time in Texas, and my girlfriend at the time, I I never brought it up to her, but it was always in the back of my mind where like I was happy that at least in her in at the time she was working at GameStop, and her immediate like management, she was able to be out, and like I was able to come visit her at work and like be affectionate and wouldn't be risking the fact that in Texas you can be fired for being gay.
Yeah,
But like I don't think I would be able to have that much of a reassurance to be that way. But the fact that she's been born and raised in Texas, I don't know, I think you just kind of like you that's just something that you kind of grow into, and you're just gonna have to like work with that. Versus for me, I grew up in very progressive areas, and all of this is a bit of a shocker. All of this kind of like makes me like shrivel up a bit and just look forward to the day where I'm not living here anymore, because I don't know how folks can do that. And but the fact that there are folks who, for whatever circumstance they are, it's like that only makes me want to fight harder for those folks to have what I have here. And like, I wanted to bring up the fact that you were talking about how you're kind of looking into options to leave Florida because of the situation with their wherever they are with like banning access to gender affirming care, especially with like hormones and stuff. Me as a non-binary person, at this moment, I'm not medically transitioning in any form, and that's just my own journey. But I've heard and I've read stories about folks and their experience with how like they literally need that to save themselves.
Yeah.
I don't know what that's like, but I fear that experience. And if I ever came to a point where that was necessary for me, I understand where you're coming from, where it's like, why can't I have this access to this gender affirming care, to this life saving care? And the fact that they're taking it away in Florida, I was just like, I don't understand how people put so much energy into giving two shits about someone else's medical health care.
My cat has so much commentary to add. I apologize if you
I
guys can
know,
hear
yeah.
that.
No worries.
He's been coming. He's on board though. He's I think that's
He's
a
like,
good
preach.
yelling.
Yeah.
He's got a lot to say. He's, he's very outspoken. But you know, and Jay, to kind of go off of what you were saying a little bit about the like fighting, especially for people that are here. I think one of the things that really it irritates me is when people see like the kind of stuff that DeSantis will pass, they'll turn around and say, "Well, Florida gets what Florida got, what they voted for," and it's like, but first of all, he had the maps so gerrymandered that like a fair election was out of question entirely. But not all of us voted for him, right? Not all of us agree with these politics. And so to say that, like, well, Florida got what they voted for, what about everybody here that didn't? And that can't leave and that can't at least maybe go immediately? Or what about the people that are here and haven't really come out yet? And now they're seeing this like co-opted hate from the state. So it really irritates me to see that sort of dismissiveness, and I see it a lot even within the LGBTQ community at large. It's like, okay, well, that's Florida, and it's like, well, not all of us are on board for what we're experiencing, right? And like, we can fight and we can hit the streets as much as we want to, but and in some regards, and that's part of the reason why I've really started to look at moving, is that when the scales are so tipped in the balance, it's such an uphill battle. And at some point, we can scream and we can fight, but until that one piece really changes, which in this point will be an election cycle, um, we're kind of at this is just kind of the battle that we're in the middle of right now. And so to say like, okay, well, that's just Florida, that's just what they got, that's just what they voted for, like, no, like, there's people here that need help, and being dismissive of that is being dismissive of a group of people that need that help and that need somebody on the outside to help fight. Because if we can make as much noise as we want to, and even still to the extent of like national journalism, it's, well, that's Florida, like, that's just kind of how the story, like, okay, well, DeSantis does this crazy thing, well, that's what we've come to expect of DeSantis. But it's like, okay, and even us here, like, we know he's crazy, but we need help. If you guys see it and you're outside and you're not restrictive in the way that we are here in the state, help us fight. Help us help bring the firepower the same way the Canucks Young Stars brought the firepower the other night. Like, bring it to Florida and help us fight, because we're not all of us have the resources or the means, to be like, deuces, I'm out. I'll go get my caramel macchiato from a Dunkin' Donuts in a blue state. Like, that's not, that's my dream, but it's not something that's an immediate remedy. Is, if you don't like it, move. Well, I would, I would be gone yesterday, 3 yesterdays ago, if it were that simple, but it's not. And it's important, I think, that people stop being so dismissive of it, because you're writing off groups of people that need your help. and you're essentially saying, well, I'm not going to give it to you because you got what you wanted. It's like not all of us wanted this.
So let's shift gears a little bit. While you're still in Florida, can you tell us a little bit about why you love the Jacksonville Icemen and so much that you are covering them?
um, I guess because it's kind of this cool thing. Like I'm in Jacksonville, and Jacksonville has a hockey team. like they're the hometown team. I've got the Jags Chiefs games on. I don't know what's happening there. They're like the Jags are the only football I really pay attention to anymore. I'm sort of nervous to look at the scoreboard, but um, yeah, I the Icemen are they're Jacksonville's team. They're my hometown team, and I'm it's a big honor to be the one to cover them because I've been a hockey fan since I was 8, and we had the Lizard Kings. Jacksonville's had a few different ECHL variations, through the years. The Lizard Kings were my first hockey game. The only thing I remember is I was like 3.5, and it was between the Lizard Kings and the Charlotte Checkers at the time, and there was a fight at Center Ice. It was still like the Jacksonville Coliseum. It wasn't even Vice Star Memorial yet. The only thing I remember from that was like an absolute yard sale happening at Center Ice. but that I've always been I really like for them to be honest. I really like for them to rebrand back to the Lizard Kings because like we don't have any ice in Florida. It's just Iceman sounds. It would be better if it were like Tidemen or Surfmen or something like that. But Iceman, uh, but yeah, I've always been a fan. Hometown, hometown representation. Really, that's what it comes down to. Um, I'm proud to see that Jacksonville has a team, and they have a team that's good. The last few seasons we've ran into the Florida Everblades in round 2 of the Kelly Cup playoffs, and they're the thorn in our side all throughout the regular season and now throughout the postseason. But to have a consistently winning team, and for my own personal benefit, really to nobody else's, the fact that it's a hockey team, it works out. It's really nice to. I love the Jags, but the Jags have had some problems as a football organization. The Icemen are at least consistent in making me proud. So I love it, and it's an honor to cover the hometown team. Really, honestly, it's hockey. It's like I said, I love the city of Jacksonville. We're so diverse here. Um, the people are always great. That's definitely changed a little bit since the pandemic. People are sometimes people are much more difficult to read at Jacksonville than they used to be for sure. But uh, the community fights for the right things. Like we just voted in Donna Deegan as our mayor here, which is pretty cool. So Jacksonville came out and showed the state of Florida that change is possible, and that when the community rallies together around the right things, change can happen absolutely in the state. So uh, yeah, big scope of things. Um, they make me proud, and they're from Jacksonville, and that's enough to do it. Truly. If I just wish they would change the name. I just wish they'd go back to being the Lizard Kings, because that's a pretty legit name, Lizard King. The commercials back in the
Florida
'90s.
Wizards.
How many hockey teams have lizards, right?
I
I'm
don't
just
think I don't I can't think of any.
my point. Every hockey team's got
Actually,
ice and men. What?
not a hockey team, but there's a college out here in San Francisco, and their mascot are gators. Why? I don't know. It's not like we have gators out here.
I love that.
Need
I love
to
that.
need to do a swap.
Honestly, one of the best things that anybody's ever told me is I was when I first moved to the Midwest in like 2015. I was working. I was a restaurant supervisor, and somebody I was working with, he was like, "So you're a big sports person?" And I was like, "Yeah." I was like, "I love sports." He's like, "So what kind of sports do you like?" He's like, "I'm a football fan." He's like, "And I like hockey." And I said, "I love hockey." He's like, "Really?" I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "But you're from Florida." I said, "Yeah." And he's like, "You can't even get ice in your drink in Florida." And I was like, "Hey, listen, we have hockey teams, man, and they're pretty
Ice
good now."
scarcity.
Yeah, you can have, and truthfully, you can have ice in your drink, but only for so long. So enjoy it while you got it.
That's funny. Whew.
Did
Have
you
a
want
fun
to talk
time with it.
about anything else, Nessa? Because usually I would go on and on, but in pretty much now the Niners are playing.
You want to go watch the game?
I kind of
Yeah,
do. I
that's
kind of
I'm
okay.
do.
This was a pretty heavy conversation. Anything else I wanted to talk about could go on for another hour. So
Right.
I'm sorry to come in and be like anger, emotion.
no, it's fine.
No,
That's
that's about half the time. That's what we come in with. So
It's just it's so it's there's a lot to talk about, and it's been nice to have
for
a
sure.
space that um, promotes, I think, the conversation that or a conversation. I'm not saying I'm an Aquarius, so excuse my God complex, but to have a conversation that will maybe help move the needle forward in the right areas. I think
yeah, it's conversations that need to be had.
yes, yeah, because I don't think I mean we can get out in the streets and picket and scream and shout all day, but I think truthfully, and the way that I've always approached like activism in a sense is I think that these one-on-one conversations where we can just inform and educate one another and share perspectives and experiences, I think those do a lot more in terms of moving the needle forward than larger actions do sometimes.
Yeah,
I
for
mean,
sure.
that's a whole conversation we could have for a whole hour about how important that is. And I guess to close it out, I want to reiterate that point that, like we spent a good deal of time talking about your experience out in Florida as a trans person and just your perspective of how these laws that are being passed are affecting you, affecting the greater scope of the trans community out in that area. And then, like that's not something that any of us can relate with because we're here. Like we could relate to certain avenues of it about how we understand how this affects the community as a whole from our own perspectives of how it affects us, but it's like we're not going to have the experiences that you shared with us today. And so yeah, like we had some other things we want to talk about, but it's not that any of what was talked about today wasn't deeply invaluable to put out into the world, and more conversations need to be happening around that.
Yeah, and
I,
I don't
I,
think we've had a guest yet who actively lives in Florida, so it's a good perspective to have on the pod.
so I'm the OG over the glass Florida man. Then that's what we're saying.
Nice. we'll give you
Florida
we'll
man,
give
yeah.
you a little medal.
Florida
I've a,
man. Oh my god, that could be the title. Florida man joins the pod.
Florida
yes,
man, the
please.
Florida man.
Like anti-Florida man, be like the anti-hero of Florida. I think the state legislature would call me an anti-man, but you know, I really do. I will have to say this before we sign off. If for people that are in Florida and may hear this or are in a similar southern state, one of my favorite things to do is just sort of laugh at the absurdity of it all. Like I will be writing an article and sometimes kind of get up, like I'll get up to use the bathroom and I'll be like, using the bathroom in my house because it's legal. And so I feel like if you remember, I mean, it's dark humor, gallows humor, but like the other day, my friend's down visiting and she's in Disney and she's also queer. And I said, listen, I think you being a gay woman at Disney World is like 4 felonies in the state of Florida. Like, I'm pretty sure. So, if humor helps me cope, and I've definitely I've enjoyed getting to share a few laughs with you guys today, and as we talk about some pretty heavy stuff.
Yeah. Thanks for the laughs though.
Yeah, for sure. I'm glad you guys appreciated Jose the Shark. I mean, that was we could have been done
It's
after
good.
that. I was like, that's it. That's it.
So many tangents we could have just continued to go off on. We'd be here for like 2 hours.
Well, I mean, if you guys are always needing somebody to another mind to join the meeting of the minds, just I'm around. I'm a I
Yeah,
read,
awesome.
I write, I watch hockey, I drink Dr Pepper. There's pretty much like nothing going on with me. So it's
Well, thank you, Andrew, for coming on today. We
it's
really
dangerous stuff.
appreciate your time.
Awesome. Thanks, Jay. Thanks, Tessa, for having me on, guys.
Thanks for joining us.
All right. As always, I am your host, Jay.
I'm co-host Nessa. Thanks again.
Goodbye.
Bye.